Today, I am going to continue talking about the chapter in Ground, Path, and Fruition by His Eminence Tai Situ Rinpoche. And the chapter is about Vipassana. Where I left off was when he was talking about the Prajna Paramita. And the intention of a bodhisattva, which is a limitless intention to work with limitless sentient beings for a limitless amount of time to eliminate limitless suffering. And of course, it takes a tremendous amount of courage to actually undertake this kind of activity. And he then mentions in this section, and this is kind of a review, different kinds of perceptions that bodhisattvas have. And one is that he sees them as having limitless potential, that is, as unrealized Buddhas that have not realized their Buddha nature. The other is that the bodhisattva sees that relative truth, that phenomena does not exist the way that ordinary beings think that it does. The bodhisattva also observes ego, attachment, and so on and so forth as being baseless. And then finally, objectless perception. And this means realizing emptiness. And as a result of that, the perceiving things dualistically, at least temporarily, is removed. So he sees the essence rather than focusing on comparisons and so on and so forth. So to go on to the part of the chapter that I did not cover is the 8 characteristics that define a Prajna Paramita text as a mother text. And this was covered at the very beginning of the book. So I'm just going to review what he said in the beginning of the book to, again, review this for everybody. So these 8 characteristics are, first of all, they have to have in them talking about Buddha nature and omniscience. The second is that they have to have knowledge of the path. And the third is knowledge of the foundation. And this means knowledge of the ultimate, that which is beyond concept. The fourth is the complete implementation. And he lists in the beginning of the book that there are 173 stages of meditation and contemplation, and that the mother text must go into this complete implementation. The fifth characteristic is implementation that reaches towards the top. And this then has this aspect of traveling the path. Then gradual implementation is the next one. And it might say gradual, but what this means is implementing all 173 aspects in one session and being able to comprehend them. needless to say, this is a very advanced state of development or realization. The seventh characteristic is momentary application, and this is that the application becomes non-dual. And at this level, all aspects are implemented in the snap of a finger. And then the eighth one, the final fruition is the realization of the Dharmakaya. So any text on the Prajna Paramita that contains all 8 of those elements is considered a mother text. So now to get into Vipassana meditation in more depth here, that there is shamatha, or calm abiding, and there is Vipassana. And shamatha is what we experience when we meditate, and it's a meditative state, whereas Vipassana is both a meditative state when we're meditating, but also it's an experience or a state that you can have when you get up off of the cushion and are going through your daily activities. And there are different ways to describe this state of Vipassana according to the Madhyamaka schools. And he's doing this to kind of give us, you might say, a template on how to place all of this. So the first is the Middle Way Autonomous School, and this focuses in on non-existence, is like looking at something that cannot be looked at. And again, we're talking about the mind. The second school is the Middle Way Consequentialist School. And this is looking at space and mind and perceiving that they are one and inseparable. The third is the Middle Way Shentong, which is empty of other. And this is the school that Tai Situ Rinpoche has been trained in. And he describes it this way, quote, "They not only meditate on the inseparability of the mind and the space it is perceiving, but also how clear, luminous, ultimately profound, incorruptible, unimaginable, ineffable, and the essence of everything," end quote. That's on page 255 of my book. So he uses a lot of words here. But the first two, which is clear or clarity, and then luminous, those are very important words. It is clear, it is empty of inherent existence, yet there is this luminosity. And he further talks about these three this way, and that is that with the first two, you have to be careful about practicing morality, because there still is this subtle duality present, and as long as there is dualistic thinking, you will create karma. So this is why it is important to practice morality with both of those approaches. The third approach sees everything in post-meditation as a pure land. And he says this is very difficult to do, and he claims that he cannot do this, that it's not a Pure Land for him, that life is full of problems, the unexpected, and so on and so forth, and that for this reason it's very difficult to maintain that post-meditation experience of everything being a pure land. And so, of course, he recommends practicing careful morality. And he goes on and says that this Shentong view, this middle way Shentong view, is applicable to Vajrayana Vipassana also. And that, so with Mahamudra and Mahaati, which comes from the Nyingma tradition, they have a similar viewpoint. Then he goes into Vajrayana Vipassana more. He talks about that in Vajrayana Vipassana, it's a mix of both Sutra and Tantra, and that the Tantras are vast in number and are continually increasing because of terma. And terma are referred to as treasure. And these are texts and practices and so forth that are hidden. And when the right person appears, they are able to discover the terma. And there are different kinds of terma. Some are what are called mind terma, and they appear in the minds of the terma discoverer. Some are buried in the ground. Some are found in the bottom of lakes. Some are actually found in the middle of a rock that cracks open, and so forth. But most of the terma are attributed to Padmasambhava, who, when he was in Tibet, left these for future people to discover. And he says that even though these are being discovered in the present day, that as always, they have to be validated carefully. You just don't say, oh yeah, that's a terma, no problem. And he also says that it's safest to follow existing practices rather than get enamored with something new. And he also stresses that Westerners especially need to be careful, that Westerners have a more difficult time discerning what is authentic. And I would add to this, discerning an authentic teacher as well. So it is best for us Westerners to stick with practices that have been done for a long time, and to stick with teachers that are, you might say, recognized by the Karmapa, Taisitu, and others of these great teachers, so that we don't get, you might say, led astray by teachers that really aren't very good teachers. There's a saying that I heard many, many, many years ago, and I've heard it many times. And this is about Tantra, because there are many different Tantras, as His Eminence Taisitu has been talking about here in the book. And This is the saying, and it might have been, it was an Indian master that came to Tibet. I'm not sure, so I'm not going to say who it is attributed to, but it is that the Indians practice one deity and realize all of them, and the Tibetans practice all and realize none of them. The point being to keep focused on the practice that you're doing and don't get distracted by new or something that appears better than what you are doing. And ultimately, the essence of all the deities is the same. So he talks about the visualization stage and the completion stage in Vajrayana practices. And the visualization stage is similar to shamatha. That is where it's sometimes called the creation stage too, and that is where you create the visualization of the deity, various things happen, and then you recite the mantra. And all of this entails visualization. And that is similar to shamatha, where you are concentrating on these things, the chants and the visualization. The completion stage is similar to vipassana, and that is when you dissolve the visualization. And the visualization is made out of light, by the way. It's not solid, it's made out of light. But you dissolve the visualization, and it all um, dissolves into the seed syllable of the deity, and then that gradually dissolves from the bottom up to the top, and then you rest in that. And so that is a form of vipassana, that disillusion stage. He then talks about a little bit, and this is historical, not so much about practice, it's about the images, the paintings, and the statues. And he said that it used to be that all of this was secret. Now it's all public. And he feels that that is all right, that is fine. But he also does mention that there is a lot of bad public relations involved with Tantra, a lot of rumors that are spread online and spread other ways, unfounded rumors. A lot of it has been, you might say, somewhat compromised by non-Buddhists using part of, whether it be the images or some aspects of Tantra and so forth, for totally different egotistical reasons. When I was a prison chaplain, I would have to look at books sometimes that inmates had, and books that were sent in, and so forth. And it was just amazing what is really out there, and how there's a lot of misinformation or even questions that I get sometimes from people that indicate that they have a very, very confused and totally unrealistic idea of what Tantra is. So he then goes into the different levels of Tantra, and it begins with the Kriya Tantra, and this emphasizes cleanliness, vegetarian eating, and the deity is visualized above your head. As I was preparing for this talk, I thought of the Nyungne, because the Nyungne emphasizes cleanliness, vegetarianism. But on the other hand, the deity is not visualized above your head. And what this means is that the Nyungne incorporates different levels of Tantra. It's not just one level. So the next level is Yoga Tantra, and this, the deity is seen as equal to you. And then there is the Anuttara Yoga, and you are the deity. And here, cleanliness is not important because you are the deity. And he mentioned Vajrayogini in a 3-year retreat situation, or if you're just doing Vajrayogini practice in a retreat situation. The retreat that I did, you did not shave. You just let your hair grow out. And you weren't supposed to bathe, and so on and so forth. He kind of finishes off this particular talk about these levels of Tantra by saying that it's good to be overly careful and to be clean, even if the Tantra you're practicing isn't that strict, that it's better to adhere to certain rules, even though they're not necessary. In other words, be careful. He then talks about vegetarianism, and I don't think I need to say too much about that. Since these talks were given, the Karmapa has come out with guidelines for Buddhist centers that are affiliated with him, monasteries, nunneries, and so forth, to follow vegetarian diet, and for the lay practitioners to at least think about the animals if you're eating meat, and try to eat less meat. So that finishes up that chapter. So now I am going to start the 10th chapter of the book. This is on Mahamudra. Mahamudra is you might say, the highest practices of the Karmakagyu lineage. And it is similar but not identical to Mahaati, which is the highest practices in the Nyingma tradition. When I was in the 3-year retreat, Khenpo Karta Rinpoche taught Mahamudra to us, and he would also say, and now this next part that I'm going to be teaching comes from the Mahaati tradition. So while they are two separate traditions, they frequently are mixed together, at least in the Kagyu lineage. There will be aspects that have been brought in from the Mahaati tradition of the Nyingma. He starts out this chapter with this quote: "Everything we experience is totally centered around our mind." And he talks about how other religions and other ideologies, all of this has everything to do with our mind. Our present body is a result of karma, and karma comes from mind. So mind and karma determines the body that we have now. It will determine where we go when we pass from this life to our next one. Mind makes us who we are. And he says that science will never find mind because there's nothing to find. That even the Buddha could not find mind. He makes a comparison with space and mind, that the mind is one of its qualities is like space, and that space, because of what it is or what it isn't, has no edge, it has no center, and neither does mind. Ultimately, mind resides everywhere and it resides nowhere. And then he contrasts what he calls the popular view. I think he uses the word New Age and so forth, with the ultimate and the relative. And his view is that ultimately there is no good or bad, and relatively there are reasons to do good things and avoid bad things. And the prevalent view is that ultimate good and bad, there is ultimate good and bad, and in terms of the relative, indifference. He actually used the term survival of the fittest, means justify the ends, whatever it takes to win. So he is describing the way he sees beings in samsara. So that's how he starts out this chapter, talking about that. Mahamudra is a path that leads to experiencing the ultimate. So this is important to know. And again, the Mahamudra practices and teachings are the highest of the Kagyu lineage. And like other parts of the Buddhist path, that it includes listening and hearing, contemplation, and practices. So he uses the term that this is active, that it requires doing things to travel the path. He makes the distinction between religion and spiritual, and that he felt that religion is static, where you don't really have to do a lot. It doesn't have the practice aspect, I think was the way he put it, whereas the spiritual has this active aspect where you need to practice and you need to practice regularly. So he then reads line by line a poem that he wrote when he was at Rumtek in, at that time, Sikkim. It is now part of India. And I would guess that this was written in the late 60s when he was quite young. So I'm going to go down this and do a little explanation as I read through it, rather than reading the whole poem and then going through it. So the first part he describes as being the view, and this is about Mahamudra. That's an important point. It's about Mahamudra. What moves and what does not move, what is visible and what is not visible, all interrelate with space. Space neither moves nor stays still. It is neither visible nor invisible. And he talks about this being the external view of Mahamudra. And again, space is not substance. It just is what allows things to happen, for substance to appear, change, interact, and so forth. The Tibetan word for space also means the sky. And when you look up at night, if you're out here where I live, where there is no light pollution, you can look up and up and up and up. And even with a telescope under good conditions, I don't think they have found the edge of the universe, the edge of space. So space neither moves nor stays still because it's not matter, it's not substance. And since it's not substance, it's neither visible or invisible. It is beyond these extremes. The next 4 lines are knowing or not knowing, realizing or not realizing, interdependent space and the mind are never separated. Mind is light in space, never bound, never released, beyond obscuration and clarification, beyond all limits. So this is the way it is, that the mind is like space, it's interdependent with space. It's not separated from space ever, but it is. It has the quality of space plus the idea of light in that space. Sometimes that would be called luminosity. It has this active role. And the idea is that everything is primordially connected, interrelated. We, in a previous book that we studied, it was titled Interconnected by the 17th Karmapa. So this too is the case here. Everything is primordially interconnected. And it is beyond far and near. And this luminosity is very simply awareness. It is not the content of awareness. It is just plain awareness. And this counters both nihilism and theism. So I'll go into nihilism first. Emptiness is beyond being everything and beyond being nothing. It is not voidness as it is sometimes translated. Not voidness in terms of being nothing. He said it's actually more accurate to say that mind is everythingness. It's just empty of inherent existence. And then theism is countered because this is beyond permanent and impermanent. Theism would be there is something permanent. It is beyond being permanent and impermanent. It is beyond time. So this is the unity of the two truths, that the way things appear and the way things are. Things may appear to be permanent and others may appear to be impermanent, but mind is beyond all of that. Thoughts come and go, experiences come and go, and so forth, but ultimately the mind never changes. Then he goes into meditation. And this is the meditation that is done in Mahamudra practice. I kind of got a chuckle out of this quote. He talks about himself, and of course, he's quite humble. So this is the quote that got me to chuckle a little bit. I don't know where I am and I don't know where I am going, but I know I am surrounded by water and that I am still alive. So I have to keep kicking for as long as I can. What he is getting at here is that life is full of problems and difficulties and so forth. And we need to lighten up, you could say, that we can frequently take things more seriously than they actually are. He says that with the Mahamudra practice, it's very important to have a strong connection to a lineage. And along with that, aspirations. That the purpose of Dharma is to free sentient beings, to bring about liberation of all sentient beings, and to increase happiness. And so that our Dharma activity has to be done with these purposes. It's easy to get sidetracked by egotistical aspirations. This doesn't mean ignoring yourself and your needs and so forth, and what you're capable of doing and what you're capable of giving up. But it is important to be motivated to liberate other beings, increase happiness with other beings, and so on and so forth. And the reason why lineage is so important is that it keeps the teachings pure. It keeps them alive. That if these Mahamudra practices were written down, but then nobody practiced them, and then an archaeologist kind of, let's say, found the equivalent of the Dead Sea Scrolls and translated it into the language of that archaeologist, and then people started practicing them, it would be a dead lineage at this point, and there would be nobody there to really give guidance about is this being interpreted properly. So the lineage keeps things going in the right direction, keeps it pure, keeps it from being corrupted. So he finishes up his introduction about meditation by saying that Mahamudra awareness is the key of all the practices of Mahamudra. I guess I will get into meditation a little bit, and then I'm going to open it up to question and answers. So the section on meditation, the first verse is wandering mind looks at the still mind. So this is the first experience that we have as meditators, that our mind is unstable, it's full of thoughts. He uses the analogy of it's like a kite that's blown about in the wind. But through years, many years of observing the wandering mind, that we come to see, quote, the nature of mind is beyond moving and not moving, end quote. So this is like flying a kite, but you have your feet on the ground. The kite is wandering, but your feet aren't wandering. And he says this is awareness. Now there's dualistic awareness going on here because you have a mind that is watching the unstable mind. The next verse is the still mind looks at the still mind. So here the kite has been cut loose. The still mind is seeing beyond moving and not moving. So there's more stability here, but it's still dualistic. You still have a mind that is observing mind. So then the next two verses are realizing your primordial nature, wandering transforms into wisdom. Up until this point, that you have had your focus on external objects. It could be the breath, it could be visualizations, prayers. It helps us look at our internal, eternal essence. But here we just look within. And on the other hand, this is very, very advanced to just look within at the mind. And at this stage, whatever you experience doesn't distract you from this awareness of our primordial nature. And there are lots of different words for that. Other words that are used are Buddha nature, Yeshe, primordial wisdom, and so forth. Basically, our ultimate nature. And at this level, the thoughts and emotions, when they arise, are just seen as the embodiment of wisdom. They do not distract you. That wandering transforms into wisdom. There is a phrase in the Mahamudra lineage supplication, which is, this is in the Four Dharmas of Gampopa, that confusion dawns as wisdom. That is the realization that these thoughts, whatever they arise, whatever sensory input you have from your five senses, and so on and so forth, it all is wisdom because it has everything to do with mind, and the ultimate nature of mind is wisdom. And it's not a logical process that I'm talking about here, is that you just realize with your awareness of the nature of mind that this is what's happening. You don't think about it, you don't analyze it, you just experience it and realize it. And he said that this is a very advanced stage, and he felt that this is describing the 16th Karmapa, who was his guru. The question was brought up about the kite wandering and your feet not wandering, and then you cut the kite and let it go, and then you have the non-wandering mind watching the non-wandering mind. What this is talking about is very similar to when you dissolve a visualization, that the visualization has many different parts, it does different things. Maybe you have offering goddesses, you have a deity that you're visualizing yourself as, you might have a front visualization, and on and on and on and on and on. And then comes the dissolution. And at the dissolution, then it all melts into light, and the light is absorbed at the seed syllable in the heart center of the deity. And then the seed syllable dissolves from the bottom up to the top. And then there's nothing. So that is that cutting the kite loose. And you have the non-wandering mind watching the non-wandering mind. I will talk about this more next Tuesday also.